يا راغبا في كل علم نافع.
ينمو العلم ويتقدم بتقنياته ومجالاته، ومعه نطور أدواتنا في تقديم العلم الشرعي. أكاديمية
زاد أكاديمية ينبوعها صاف ليروي غلة الظمآن، ومكارم الأخلاق ندرسها معا، أدب وتربية على الإحسان. بشرى لنا زاد أكاديمية للعلم كالأزهار في البستان.
السلام عليكم ورحمة الله. الحمد لله رب العالمين، والصلاة والسلام على أشرف المرسلين نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. Another rights to be observed in our life, which is the rights of the spouses as part of the Islamic education. Rights to be observed in this entire life that we live is basically right after the other. And the subject of the spouses is such an important one, of course. It's a strong relationship that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala meant for it to be a special one, to be a strong one. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala called it in the Quran مِيثَاقًا غَلِيظًا, which means thick covenant. Verses in the Quran were revealed as a result of that to govern this relationship. A hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, we have the example of the Prophet ﷺ, such an important relationship again that many people, they don't see it as part of the deen. This is part of the deen of Islam, rights that has to be observed. And the rights meaning that this is obligation, this is an obligation that has to be there, even though when people are living together, life is not just about fulfilling the obligations, it's beyond that. It's وَعَاشِرُهُنَّ بِالْمَعْرُوفِ, is to live with them with goodness. And therefore, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala commanded the believers for this relationship to be strong because of the effect of it to the ummah of the Prophet ﷺ, having children as a result of that, that they will be strong upon the deen of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It's all about fulfilling the objective and the purpose of this life, and that is to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala alone. And to prevent the things that would make the people break their relationship and not to observe what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wanted from us. So therefore, when it comes to these rights, either it's the rights of the husband or the rights of the wife, or common rights between both. So the first one is, of course, is the right of the husband on his wife. So it's three types basically: the rights of the husband, the rights of the wife, and the common rights. The rights of the husband on his wife is basically, in the deen of Islam, is the biggest, is the greatest right after the right of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The husband has more rights on his wife once she's married than her even own parents. And of course, the good husband, he would not prevent the wife from fulfilling the kindness and the goodness that she should observe to her parents. But when it comes to the rights, and this is as the Prophet ﷺ, he said in the hadith that sometimes people, they feel unease when it comes to this hadith. But it's a beautiful one if people understand it in the right way. The Prophet ﷺ, he said, لا يصلح لبشر أن يسجد لبشر ولو صلح لبشر أن يسجد لبشر لأمرت المرأة أن تسجد لزوجها من عظم حقه عليها. He said, it is not befitting for a human being to make sujood to another human being. Of course, this is an act of disbelief. And if it was to be fitting, I would have asked the woman to make sujood to her husband. Why? Because of min عظم حقه عليها, because of the great right that he has upon her. And who's the one that gave him this right? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And therefore it's the obedience of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that the wife would observe by fulfilling the rights of her husband. And I always mention this because really when people are righteous, the husband, his favor that he does to the wife, because of if they are righteous, taking care of her, as it's going to be mentioned, the rights of the wife, of course, but to protect her religion, for her to be at home, which is the most beloved place to her, for her to be protected from falling into sins and mingling with people and things like this. And instead, on the other hand, he's the one that is facing the world. and he's incurring upon himself all kinds of difficult things and even sinful matters, all of that, and the wife is protected, her religion is protected, which is the most important thing in one's life. So this is such an important thing, of course, and that's why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made al-qiwama, or the leadership, or the one that is in charge, is to be for the man. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made this very clear: الرجال قوامون على النساء. Men are the maintainers of the women. They are in charge of the women. بما فضل الله بعضهم على بعض, because of what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave them of the ability to do so. They are different, they are physically different, and therefore Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave the man what is sufficient for him to lead his household and to lead his wife, and also when it comes to the financial responsibility as a result of that. The obedience of the husband, to be obedient to him, to fulfill his rights, and that comes before even the obedience of the parents and fulfilling their rights. And that's why Imam Ahmad rahimahullah, when a woman, she was married and she had a mother that is sick, and he said to her, طاعة زوجها أوجب عليها من أمها. The obedience of her husband is more of an obligation, more than her mother. And we know the level of the mother. And that's why the responsibility of the sons when it comes to these situations is more. And of course, it doesn't have to be either or. Of course, the husband is someone that is also caring and so on, but it shows the rights. So that's why the rights of the husband is far more and more important and comes before any other rights. When it comes to the fulfillment of the right of the husband, this is part of the right of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam, he said, وَالَّذِي نَفْسِي بِيَدِهِ لَا تُؤَدِّي الْمَرْأَةِ حَقَّ رَبِّهَا حَتَّى تُؤَدِّي حَقَّ زَوْجِهَا. By the one my soul is in his hand, swearing by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the woman would never ever fulfill the rights of her Lord till she fulfilled the right of her husband. حَتَّى لَوْ سَأَلَهَا نَفْسَهَا وَهِيَ عَلَى قَتَبٍ لَمْ تَمْنَعْهَا. Even if he asks her for herself, meaning for the relations, even if she is by the oven or the like of this, she would not prevent herself. So this is, it shows the rights and the level of the husband in the heart of the wife, of course. And as we will see also the other side of the coin, which is the rights of the wife on her husband, you would see the perfect balance in the life between the husband and the wife in the deen of Islam. The rights of the husband, to fulfill it, it's one of the means to enter the Jannah of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. As the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam, he said, إِذَا صَلَّتِ الْمَرْأَةُ خَمْسَهَا, if the woman prays her 5 daily salah, وَصَامَتْ شَهْرًا, and she fasts the month of Ramadan, وَحَصَّنَتْ فَرْجَهَا, and she protect her chastity, وَأَطَاعَتْ زَوْجَهَا, and she's obedient to her husband, قِيلَ لَهَا, it will be said to her, ادْخُلِي الْجَنَّةِ مِنْ أَيِّ الْأَبْوَابِ شِئْتِ, enter the Jannah from any of the gates of the Jannah you would wish to enter. This is how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made it simple for the wife, as it's the command of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. When it comes to the fulfillment of the rights of the husband in the intimate relationship, this is, of course, he has the right upon her in this, as long as there's no harm to be afflicted upon her. As the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam, he warned the woman, if the man, he asked for his wife to be in bed with him, فَأَبَتْ, if she refuses, فَبَاتَ غَضْبَانَ عَلَيْهَا, and he spent the night angry with her, لَعَنَتْهَا الْمَلَائِكَةُ حَتَّى تُصْبِحْ, the angels would curse her till the morning. As long, again, as there's no harm, as the ulama, they say. One of these rights is for her to stay at home, and she does not leave except by his permission. As Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said to the wives of the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam, and to the believing women, وَقَرْنَ فِي بُيُوتِكُنَّ وَلَا تَبَرَّجْنَ تَبَرُّجَ الْجَاهِلِيَّةِ الْأُولَى, which means stays in your home, and do not adorn yourself the ways of the first Jahiliyyah, when they would go out of their homes without observing the hijab. Aisha radiallahu anha, she said, فَقُلْتُ ذَلِّي إِلَى أَبَوَيْ, can I have the permission, in the hadith, in the long hadith of al-ifk, the slander, and she asked the Prophet ﷺ, give me the permission to go to my parents. That means to go out. So she's seeking permission from the Prophet ﷺ. And this is something that is a very obvious right that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made it for the wife to observe. One of these rights also not to even have optional fasting except by the permission of her husband. As the Prophet ﷺ, he said, لا يحل للمرأة أن تصوم وزوجها شاهد إلا بإذنه. It is not permissible for the woman to fast while her husband is present except by his permission. And that's why the permission, meaning that he might have her to fulfill his rights and things of that nature. And that's why Aisha radiallahu anha, she would delay making up the days of the fasting of Ramadan till Sha'ban. One of which also is to guard her household when the husband is not present. فَالصَّالِحَاتُ قَانِتَاتٌ حَافِظَاتٌ الْغَيْبِ بِمَا حَفِظَ اللَّهِ. The righteous women, as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala praised them, they are devoted in obedience to their husbands and they're guarding their household. They do not allow anyone to enter without the permission. And there are ways or many ways to show this. And this is something that we'll talk about inshallah ta'ala next time. But as you see here, it's one right after the other. And it's all again to protect the religion. When you reflect upon this, we're talking about righteousness, about the objective of things. It's not about the greed of oneself. It's about the benefit that comes as a result of that. And these rights, when there's two or people are in a relationship, you have to look into the both rights or both sides. Otherwise, if someone is fulfilling the rights upon them versus the other one is not, then life becomes very difficult. That's why it goes together. And when it goes together, and people, when they see it together, then it's a beautiful thing. We'll continue with that inshallah ta'ala next time with some of these forms or the ways that the wife would observe when it comes to the rights upon her. And then after that, the other different rights inshallah ta'ala. وصلى الله وسلم وبارك على محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.
يا راغبا في كل علم نافع
ينمو العلم ويتقدم بتقنياته ومجالاته، ومعه نطور أدواتنا في تقديم العلم الشرعي. أكاديمية زاد
أكاديمية ينبوعها صاف ليروي غلة الظمآن، ومكارم الأخلاق ندرسها معا، أدب وتربية على الإحسان. بشرى لنا زاد أكاديمية للعلم كالأزهار في البستان.